Alright, YouTube, we have a scandal breaking right now that if it gets proper media coverage, which it's being buried by Syria at the moment, but if it got proper coverage would probably be just as big as Watergate. Not just for Obama, but for Congress people who swear up and down that the NSA is there to protect us against terrorists. Let's look, and there's a link in the description as always, at this story that comes from, well, I'm reading it from Reuters, but it comes from Germany's Spiegel. U.S. spy agency bugged UN headquarters. Okay, that sounds innocuous. Let's read a little bit deeper. The U.S. National Security Agency, the NSA, has bugged the United Nations New York headquarters. In the summer of 2012, NSA experts succeeded in getting into the UN video conferencing system and cracking its coding system, according to one of the documents cited by Spiegel. These are documents released, by the way, by Snowden, the same documents that The Guardian had to destroy because the British government went after them. The data traffic gives us internal video teleconferences of the United Nations, Der Spiegel quoted one document as saying, adding that within 3 weeks the number of decoded communications rose to 258 from 12. Now I ask you this. Let's set aside for the moment that we don't know how much the NSA costs us, and that it could be tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, because of course they've got all these high-tech gadgets, they've got to operate these servers and computers, they've got to coordinate everything, they've got to hire thousands of people to run these systems and go through the data. Let's let that aside for a moment. Let's set aside the fact of the magical expanding number that they keep giving us as to how many terrorist plots this has supposedly thwarted, because remember, again, as I've pointed out, Boehner said 2, Pelosi said a dozen, Clapper said like 60, and then it went to 300 and something a few weeks later. So it's a magical expanding number, which means we have no clue how many terrorist plots, if any, this is actually thwarted. Let's set aside for a moment the fact that this is probably unconstitutional, and at the very least it's immoral. Really doesn't make sense and is probably an ineffective dud of a program, and that the author of the Patriot Act itself said it went too far. Let's put all of that aside. Let's even put aside the fact that yesterday night it broke that individual agents, and by the way, this proves that Obama is either doesn't have a clue what's going on or lied straight to our faces when he said, well, we know of no instances when this is being abused by the agents. Well, guess what? They have something called LOVE-INT, which is self-reporting, basically saying that the agent went after someone who was totally not on any list, but they wanted to spy on a love interest or somebody else that they knew. And they put that down. And by the way, the only time we know that they're doing this is when they self-report it, which means there's probably tens of thousands of instances where people were stalked by NSA agents just by virtue of being one of their friends or ex-girlfriends, maybe a relative, a slutty sister, or something like that. Let's put all of this aside. Doesn't it seem a little odd to you that if the purpose of this program is to prevent terrorism, to spy on terrorists, terror suspects, even criminals, you can extend it that far because they've been trying to use, the DEA has been using these programs, information for some time now to do just that. Let's put that in perspective. If the reason for this program is to spy supposedly on terrorists, would you not think that it's odd to then bug the UN headquarters? Does the UN headquarters, is it a regular meeting place for Al-Qaeda? Is it a regular meeting place for, does Assad go there with Saddam Hussein's corpse and have tea? This makes absolutely no sense, and there are still people who are so thick-headed, they're so dense, that they don't see what's going on here. We're spying on our allies through their teleconferencing system. And goes on here. Where does it say it? Oh, this gets even better. Where does it say it? I'm going to try to find it. According to the documents, the NSA runs a bugging program in more than 80 embassies and consulates worldwide called Special Collections Services. The surveillance is intensive and well organized and has little or nothing to do with warding off terrorists. No shit. It took the Germans to tell us this? Like we couldn't have figured it out for ourselves? Let's just look at this from a logical perspective. Let's put our patriotism aside and say the Fourth Amendment is not involved. Let's put our dignity aside and say, well, there's nothing wrong with them spying on the mass populace as long as it's to keep us safe. Do you honestly think that hijacking the teleconferencing system of some embassy out in the Sudan is going to help us there to keep us safer from terrorists? It makes no difference. This has nothing to do with terrorism. Obama has just been exposed as having lied through his teeth on 3 different occasions, this being the most drastic. Congress lied. The people at the NSA lied. Clapper came out and told Congress, no, the agents aren't misusing their powers. Well, it was a lie. Oh, well, this is just to catch terrorists. If you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't be afraid of this. It's not going to go through your phone records because you're not talking about blowing things up. Do they do that on a regular basis at the UN headquarters? This is beyond the scope of weird. And I guarantee that it was knowledge that Snowden had this material and knew this was going on that caused the UK government to misuse its own laws to go after the Guardian in a vain attempt to cover this information up. And I guarantee that people are flipping out right now at the State Department and the NSA. Obama's probably got sweat dripping down his head. This is a Watergate moment. This is an impeachable offense. This is impeachable. He lied to the American people. Clapper lied to, at the very least, get rid of Clapper. He lied to Congress. Clearly. His own words are direct contradiction of what then came to pass. He lied to Congress. Put him in jail. Then impeach Obama. Then go after Bush and say, well, you know, Bush knew about all these programs because they predate Obama. He must have known that was going on too. Put him in jail too. In a perfect world, this level of corruption against our Constitution, our dignity, and our allies now, it's not just the United States, well, you know, we're collecting all your phone and internet data. By the way, they can collect 75% of all data that gets filtered through the internet right now, and they're looking to make that 100%. Despite the fact that they can crack almost any encryption, they can read every email you send, and that their agents admittedly do, only on occasion, but occasionally do stalk their loved ones. Putting all that aside, we now know that we spied on the UN. Do you people not think this is going to piss off our allies? This is going to piss off most of Europe. It's going to piss off our allies in Central and South America. It's going to piss off our Asian allies too. We probably have bugged the consulate in Russia. We've probably bugged the consulate in Israel. What, for all of you evangelicals out there, do you feel safe knowing that your government doesn't even trust the Israelis anymore because you think that they're God's chosen people? This is bizarre. It's gotten to the point where I'm convinced everybody in the country must know that this is unconstitutional by now. They must know that it goes too far. Even the author of the Patriot Act has said that. Republicans and Democrats, people on both sides of the aisle, are largely agreeing that this program is kind of fishy, that it's an overreach of government power, that it's probably ineffective and too expensive for us to afford anyway. Why aren't we going after the people that are creating these programs? Why aren't we curbing them? It's gotten to the point where I'm convinced that the vast majority of the American public is aware that this is an abuse of government power, that they realize that this is all a bad joke. The thing that prevents them from being outraged and why they don't care is because they don't want to admit to themselves that they have basically slipped into a 1984 state. This is beyond McCarthyism. In the McCarthy era, yeah, they chased some communists down by van and surveilled them, sort of kept a lookout, make sure they weren't talking to Russian or Chinese spies, and they caused a few people to lose their jobs over supposedly being communist. They never spied on the entire population. The internet has ironically, and cell service has ironically allowed them to do that. What we should be doing right now is demanding that Obama be impeached. Demanding that a large number of the people on the Security Council in the Congress get removed from those positions. Replace them with people like Holt and Amash, who actually understand civil liberty. There should be marches in the streets, but it's gotten to the point where the only time Americans march is over money. It's gotten to the point where we're the one country left where people don't even riot after a sporting event. People have become that lazy. It's really sad to see, too, because we used to be the country that was the land of the free. People would come from other countries. They'd come here and say, wow, it's rich, it's prosperous, it's free, I can say what I want. I can do all of these things that I can't do in my home country. Maybe this is a way of solving the immigration issue. Maybe the #1 concern of Obama and all the other people in Washington is actually stopping immigration for some reason. An epidemic is coming, overcrowding, something like that. And they decided, well, we'll just make this country miserable to live in. We'll take away the spark of freedom and liberty that actually causes people to want to live here. Because guess what? If you don't want constitutional freedom, but you want to live in a prosperous society, there are plenty of other countries on earth that already are prosperous. There are countries that are more wealthy than the United States. Why wouldn't somebody who's skilled and wants at least marginal freedom, why wouldn't they just go there? Why wouldn't somebody it's gotten to the point now where if you want freedom of expression, you almost have to move to a rural third world country. Because this country has become overdeveloped to the point where there's really no wilderness left to go to that's still actually arable. You'd have to go to the Amazon jungle or something. If you want to be left alone and you think that you don't need to be spied on if you're not doing anything wrong. See, the going trend is the government and all the shills that are, and let's face it, Uncle Sam has tens of thousands of sock accounts, and that is true. That's not a conspiracy. It's openly admitted that the Air Force does run such a service. They just shill constantly, and their line is, if you don't have anything to hide, you shouldn't worry. You shouldn't be concerned about the program. You shouldn't do anything about it. It's okay. It doesn't breach your rights because X, Y, Z, and they give a bunch of bullshit explanations as to why it doesn't, when everyone knows that if King George or whoever had done this when the founders were still alive, they would have kicked them all the way back to Boston, put them on ships, and send them back to England. It's kind of what we formed the country around in the first place. Rather, the line should be, if I don't have anything to hide, I shouldn't have to worry about the government spying on me in the first place. If I walk down the street with wires sticking out of my shoes, screaming Allah Akbar, then yeah, probably someone needs to keep an eye on me. Guess what? Unless you assume that 99% of the population is potential terrorists, this shouldn't be a problem. We don't need to conduct surveillance on the entire population. It's not necessary. This is no logical, sane, reasonable person would think that the government actually needed such a program to prevent terrorism. I hate to break this to you, but yeah, 9/11 was terrible. I know. Everything changed after 9/11. Terrible. Terrorists, they hate our freedom. They hate our freedom, so we're going to give up all of our freedoms and privacy. That never made any sense, but everything's changed since 9/11. Oh, it's terrible. Everyone hates America. We've got to spy on the whole population. It's not going to make us any safer. You have a better chance of being shot by a police officer than getting killed by a terrorist. Yeah, terrorists will probably occasionally still attack our country. This program isn't going to stop them, any more than it stopped the Boston bombings. I would challenge the federal government to point out half a dozen, that's 6, instances in which the NSA spying has actually broken up a credible terrorist threat. Credible, as in not some teenage kid converted to Islam and started listening to Osama's sermons on their iPod, and the federal government got wind of it, so they gave him a fake bomb and then told him to go press this button out behind a bank. That's not a credible terrorist threat. That person never would have done that if they hadn't been given the means. They weren't violent to begin with. They were egged on by the establishment. I'm talking about credible threats. I'm talking boots on the ground. Yes, there are active jihadists, Al-Qaeda members or whatever, actually planning something, and they have the actual means to do it. And by the way, don't you find it a little bit odd that right now the FSA groups over in Syria that we're funding, we're actually paying them a wage, something like $150 a month, which is decent wage over in that part of the world. Don't you find it odd that we're supporting them when we're talking all this stuff about Al-Qaeda's trying to attack us over here, but Al-Qaeda backs the FSA and we're funding them? Does anybody find that a little bit odd? But no, this should be a Watergate moment. This should be front page news everywhere. Everybody should be reading about this right now. This is literally more important even than Syria. We could put, if we rushed this to the front, we could put Syria on hold just under the fact that it looks like Obama's breaking the Constitution's spine right now. And it's not just Obama, and it's not just Bush. It's not the Democrats or Republicans, it's both of them. Really, it's the authoritarians, mainly older individuals who are controlled by corporations, that are pushing these programs. Because they don't give a shit if they're reelected. They've already made hundreds of millions of dollars bilking you and me. What happened to all those trillions of dollars that disappeared from the Pentagon after 9/11? Well, nobody seems to know where they are. Just more strange things going on lately, and I have to give credit. Snowden and Hastings, not Hastings, Manning. Hastings is important too for different reasons. Snowden and Manning, through WikiLeaks and through these leaks through The Guardian and other media sources, have done more to expose the corruption and lies of the United States government than any other people in the history of time, in the history of our country. The founders, I think, would be proud of these individuals, because I think that if the founders of this country were still alive, they'd shake their heads in awe at what the American people eventually decided to put up with. Why are we putting up with this? They're wasting our money to spy on people who aren't terrorists, and it's not keeping us safe. And now they're spying on the UN. Google the United Nations and ask yourself if that's a terrorist organization, if that makes any sense. But that's about all. Peace out.